AutoCAD 1 2D Drafting, Boston Architectural College. Hello everyone. In this video we're going to take a little time and look at another AutoCAD drawing object, something called a hatch pattern. And hatch patterns are the way we add tone that suggests material, or patterns that suggest material, to our drawings. So you may be familiar with this. This is our existing condition elevation, and here you see on our one-story building we have this kind of random stone pattern, and on the tall portion we have a brick pattern on the wall, and then in the doors a board pattern which suggests wood boards. And all of this is done in our drawings by the use of the hatch pattern. So I'm going to go to my drawing that I've been working along on that shows our existing conditions, or existing floor plan and existing elevations. And let's take a look at how the hatch pattern works. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and we see I've got my openings here for my windows that I'm going to place in there, but I'm just going to use these as containers for a hatch pattern. And I'm also going to do something else. I'm going to start my line command and just draw some random lines that cross here. And I'm just doing this as a way of example to show you how the hatch command works. So right up here on our draw panel, on our ribbon, down in the lower right hand corner is something called the hatch. And if we do the little pull down there, we see we can get hatch or a gradient or something called a boundary. What we're more concerned in are these two commands here, hatch and gradient. So hatch, if we hold over this a minute or two, we get a little more information on it. But I'm going to click on that, and as soon as I do that, the ribbon changes into this ribbon that controls the hatch command specifically, and it tells you right there that this is called the hatch creation tab. And here we select our patterns, and we see that right now there's just a few shown here, but I can do this little pull down, and we see we have several different patterns which come shipped with AutoCAD. We also have some gradients or some tones, and then also some ISO type patterns which are included in this, and then a few more down here. So I'm going to pick one of the ones up at the top here, and you will notice some of these, all of the names start with the letters AR. What this means is that they are intended for architectural use, and they start off being drawn at true size. So what does that mean? This means, for instance, right here, this AR BRSTD means brick standard, and it's drawn to true brick size. So if I pick on that as the pattern I want to use, and then let's say come into my closed area here and click, you'll see that the pattern fills in. Now right now I just placed this on the same layer that my openings were on. Notice that the command line still is asking us to select more area, so I can come over here and click on this and it'll place it there. If I'm done, I need to hit enter to get out of it. So we do have in our layers something called the ALF pat, and that's intended to hold our patterns, our hatch patterns, or our gradients. So I'm just going to click on this, and notice when I click on this, although I just clicked in one opening here, it looks like two separate objects, but in fact all of the hatch that gets placed while one command is in session, or one command is in process, all of those parts are considered all part of the same hatch object. So I clicked over here. I'll do that again. I'll escape out of it. I'll click in this window, and when I do, both areas of hatch are selected, and that's because it's all considered one object because it was all placed during one command. So that makes it easy for me, because what I want to do is go back to my Home tab, and I'm going to select the ALF pat layer and then hit enter, and so now it's on the correct layer. So as I mentioned, this particular brick pattern, the AR brick standard, was supposed to have been drawn to a true size. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at what that means. If I go up to my measure option here and click on distance, It's not allowing me, it's snapping to the frame or the outside rectangle, but it's not snapping to any of the hatch pattern objects. So if I want to make an accurate measurement of this, I have to do something first, and that is to go, let me escape out of that, and go up to the big red A application menu and go to the options button. And on the options button, I will go to the drafting tab, which happens to be open for me here. And notice down here in the lower left-hand corner, we see a section called Object Snap Options. And we have right now, by default, turned on Ignore Hatch Objects is turned on. Well, that means that I won't get hung up if I move over a dense hatch pattern by various different the cursor constantly snapping to it. So that is useful, but right now I do want to take a measurement. So I'm going to turn that off to ignore, hit apply, go back, and then try that again and go hit my measure and distance, and now you'll see that in fact it is snapping to the endpoints and intersections of my hatch pattern. So if I want to measure one of these elements here, say from here to here, and it tells me that that in fact is 8 inches long, which is a standard brick, and click from here to here, and in about 2 and some odd number 21/30 seconds, but that's typically called 2 2/3 inches, and that's a standard brick dimension that is used in construction. So what makes this pattern special, the AR patterns? As I said, they're drawn to true size. Well, doesn't that mean that all patterns are drawn to true size? Well, various patterns are drawn to various sizes depending on the pattern. So if I go back up to my hatch command, start the hatch command, and if I go up here on the hatch creation ribbon now, and I choose something else, there are several other in here that are marked with the AR. But if I scroll down, or actually I'll stay right up here, go scroll up a little bit, and there are these patterns called ANSI or ANSI 31 and ANSI 32. I'm going to pick on, say, the ANSI 31, click on that, and then come over here to my enclosed area, my rectangle, and if I hold it there, notice what happens, that it looks like instead of a series of lines, it's almost a solid pattern or a solid tone all the way across. Well, that has to do with the fact that these lines are actually drawn very close together. They're actually, in their default state, drawn just about 1/8 of an inch apart. So if I wanted to have a series of parallel lines, I would need to change the scale. And that's over here on the ribbon, this little area here. If we hold our cursor over it, it tells us it's the hatch pattern scale. And I would need to increase that. Now I can increase it like this, but that would take a long time. So I'm going to change it kind of dramatically and say type in 48 or 50, you could put in either or. Oops, I didn't mean to hit the slash. And now if I come over here and click, notice what happens. So now the lines are much farther apart. Essentially they're 1/8 of an inch times 48. So that essentially makes them about 8 inches apart. And while the command is still active here, I can go up and say if that width is too far for me or too large, I can come in and change that and say make it 24 and hit. And so now they're the half size apart. So I can change, by changing the pattern scale up here, I can change the way this particular pattern renders in terms of how far apart the parallel lines are. And while the command is still active here, the other thing I can do up here at the hatch creation ribbon is I can do other things, such as change the angle that these lines come in. The pattern, the ANSI 31 pattern, in fact all the ANSI patterns bring their lines in at a 45-degree angle, but you can change that just by dragging this across. And in fact, if I actually type in 45 here, then the lines would be vertical as opposed to coming in at the 45-degree angle. So all these different options are available to the pattern, and particularly while the pattern is active, while the command is still active for placing the pattern. And the other thing that can happen while the command is still active if it is still active, and it appears it is, we still have the hatch creation ribbon up here, is I can change patterns. So while the command is still active, I can go through here and change the pattern that I want in place. But notice that it is still coming in at the 45-degree angle, which means essentially it's vertical. But there are, you can just go through and select these various patterns to change while you are in still in the placement of the hatch pattern, still in the hatch mode. But also notice here that if I go and choose the AR, one of the AR patterns, this one's called B816, which means it's a brick 8 by 16 inches, that it comes in here and all we see is a single line. And why is that? Well, because we still have the scale set to 24. So if I wanted to use the brick pattern, I would have to come back here and change that to 1. And the brick, because I've set the angle at 45, is in fact coming in at a 45-degree angle. So if I wanted that to come in as a typical brick pattern, I would need to change that back to 0. And there we have it. So now with the scale at 1 and the angle at 0, we have 8 by 16 inch bricks coming into our drawing as a pattern we could place. Okay, so if I want to finish placing the pattern, I just have to enter the hit the enter key, and the command finishes, and the hatch pattern is placed in my area. So one other feature about hatch I wanted to mention, and that's why I kind of drew this odd little object down here, is something called associativity, or hatch associativity. And what that means is hatch can be associated. A hatch always needs a closed boundary. So if I come up right now, I'm just in my drawing, my wide open drawing, and if I come up here to the hatch pattern, it doesn't matter which one I choose. The command says pick internal point. If I just click out here, it says a closed boundary could not be determined, and it will not try and hatch the entire infinite universe here, because that would take a long time and not really be very useful. So you have to have a closed boundary for the hatch to be placed. So I'm going to close this, and what we saw up here is that we had just rectangles drawn, which, as we know, is one continuous polyline. But it doesn't have to be a closed polyline. It can just be an area like this. It can just be lines that cross, as long as they contain an area without any areas kind of leaking out. So I can just come in between these lines, and if I click, my pattern is placed. And notice up on the ribbon there, the hatch creation ribbon, there is this feature that is turned on here called associative. So what that means is, if I hit enter and accept that that's the pattern I want, that means that this pattern is associated with these lines. So if I happen to move one of these lines, like click here and grab that, the pattern will update to fill whatever space that I've changed the shape to. So I can move any one of these lines around, and as long as I don't break the enclosure, then the pattern will continue to update and fill that shape in, whatever that new shape is. And so for instance here, I can pull this down. As long as I contain it, it will update. Now if I happen to break it, if I click here and then drag this line out, you will see on the command line, hatch boundary associativity removed. That means the hatch is no longer related to or associated to the line work that encloses it. And now if I do change anything else about this shape, the pattern's not going to update with it. So that's what associativity means. And you can turn that on and off however you want. So if I come back up here to my closed rectangles and click on my hatch pattern and bring that up, and we'll try just something different here. Let's say herringbone pattern, just for something different. Or maybe I'll try these 8 by 8 bricks and bring it over here. Right now the associativity option is turned on, but I can click on that and turn it off, and now I can place this and hit enter. And now if I grab these lines and move them, it will not update. So let me go do an undo, a couple undos here, and bring it back. Now if I click on, after the pattern is placed, if I click on the pattern to select it, oops, I still have something on my command line I need to get rid of, and click on this, once I do that, the hatch editor or hatch ribbon comes up. And I don't know if you noticed that there. I shouldn't have closed that so quickly, but what it said is that this is a non-associative hatch pattern. And the problem, and we cannot do this, we cannot change this, unfortunately, right here to being an associative hatch pattern. So when you're placing the hatch, you have to turn that on if in fact you want to make sure that your hatch is tied to or associated to the surrounding geometry, so that if the geometry moves, the hatch pattern will correct itself to fill that in. Okay, so let's place some hatch pattern on our elevation, similar to what we see here. That came with the handouts, some random stonework and brick and board that we see over here. And we'll do that in our drawing here. So let me do a Z enter, E enter for extents. And I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff that I did here for example. And type in E for erase, click on that, get rid of that, type in E, enter, click on that, and get rid of all that. Okay, so let's place some pattern on this front elevation like we saw on the on this one here, the front that has the lower portion and the tall portion. And you'll notice, actually, let's go back to that quickly, that the pattern doesn't fill the entire area. It doesn't fill the entire elevation all the way across, but is kind of contained within kind of these wavy lines. And that's a typical practice on architectural elevations, especially when they're elevations that are being used for some kind of construction information, where we have things like dimensions and notes and such. We don't want to fill the entire thing too much, because we do want some space available so that our text and our dimensions are not covered over. So for instance here, right here, this one that shows the height of the overhead door is sitting on top of this hatch pattern here, the brick hatch pattern, and you could consider that being obstructed, make it sit not quite as clear as to what that is. So it might be something we'd want to avoid. And containing our pattern to certain areas is one way of doing that. So let's go back to our drawing here. So one way to contain that is you have to actually, because the hatch has to be within a enclosed area, is to create boundaries that don't actually print when you go to print. And we have a layer here called def points, and if you remember, we talked about this was mentioned in an earlier video, that def points is a special layer in AutoCAD in that it will any objects on the def points layer will never ever print. You can't force them to print, they never will. It's hardwired into the software. So if I make the def points my active layer, and just like I did on my other elevation there, the completed one, I want to create some contained areas here for my for where I'm going to place my hatch pattern, then I might say start the polyline command, and I'm going to turn off the object snap and just kind of drag a zigzag shape right across, and then hit enter. Then what I can do is type in PE for polyline edit, click on that line, and one of the options in my polyline edit is something called spline, so I'll click on that, and instead of being this very kind of sharp edged line, now it turns into a kind of wavy line. So I'll hit enter to get out of the PE edit command, and if I'm not quite happy with the way those curves are, if I want them a little curvier, I can click on it, grab the grips, and just drag this to make it a little wavier. Okay, so now that I've got that drawn, I can just copy that say over to this side of the elevation, and then maybe onto the lower portions over here, and then hit enter. So now if I want to place my my hatch pattern, I can come up here and I want to change my active layer to the ALF Pat. You'll also notice that we have these structural lines that show the roof and the floor. So that in fact is actually, even though these lines are dashed, AutoCAD is going to read those as a solid line. So we have to be aware of that. And I could either freeze these lines right now, but let's just leave them on so you can kind of see what happens here. So now if I go to the hatch patterns, start the hatch command, and I will in fact use a standard brick because our tall portion of our building here is the standard brick. This is the, it looks like it's showing up with the 8 by 8, which is not what I want, but I'm going to click on the brick standard and hover over this, and it fills that area in, and notice that it's being stopped by the line that makes up the door opening. If I go in here, it'll fill in there, as long as it's an enclosed area. But also notice what's happening up at the top there, that it is being stopped by that structural line, the line that marks the line of the roof. So I'm going to get out of this for a second, and I'm just going to freeze the layer that these S lines are on, because I want the pattern to go all the way down to the all the way up to the end there, not be stopped by the structural line. So up here on my layers, I have a little command here that says freeze, so I don't have to actually go into the list and find the S grade, although I could. But if I just pick on this command here that says freeze, it asks me to select objects, and if I select this object, it will in fact freeze those S lines. So now if I come back up to this hatch command, click on hatch, there's my brick standard, and I can come over here and it will fill the area that I want. So I can click there, I can come over here and click here, and then hit enter, and there we have the hatch pattern placed, showing the brick material. And again, because it was all placed within one session or one command, even though it's separated here, it is treated by AutoCAD as one object. So we also need to show some material here on our shorter or one-story portion of our building, rather, our elevation, existing conditions. And the one we show on the handout shows this kind of random rock or masonry pattern on it. So unfortunately, we don't really have that comes standard with AutoCAD, but let's place a hatch pattern there anyway, just to show it as a kind of holder. And a little later, we'll take a look at how to load a different hatch pattern into our collection or into our library. So it comes here, I start the hatch command, it comes here to our ribbon with the hatch creation ribbon. And if I look down through this, I see a lot of different kind of brick patterns that are available, and of course some lines and that type of thing. But I don't see anything really that talks about stone. There's gravel, but that wouldn't be really appropriate for an elevation of a building. You wouldn't make a building up out of gravel necessarily. So why don't I just place a different kind of brick pattern here? Maybe the 8 by 8 pattern, and I'll click here and come over here and click here. And again, because it was placed in one AutoCAD session, it's treated as one object by AutoCAD. However, there is one problem with this. I placed it on the wrong layer. For some reason I had a different layer active, so I'm going to go back to the Home tab, select it, and place that on the ALF Pat where it belongs. Okay, so there's our little investigation into how to work with AutoCAD hatch patterns to place materials. In the next video, we'll take a look at how to get some other patterns loaded into AutoCAD to make them available to us. So we'll see you then.